Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. And it is time for a review of the new Deerhunter record, Why Hasn't Everything Already Disappeared? The famed indie outfit Deerhunter, they are back with a new record. The Atlanta band has long been celebrated for their noisy, neo-psychedelic, and surreal approach to indie rock and pop, and they have crafted some pretty excellent records over the course of their nearly 2-decade existence. Cryptograms, Microcastle, and what I see as like the crown jewel of their discography, Halcyon Digest. However, I do think the band has been taking some puzzling turns lately and overemphasis on solo material. One of their more recent releases, Monomania, was so lo-fi that I think it kneecapped the enjoyability of the record. Meanwhile, the band's last big commercial record, Fading Frontier, was so clean in its presentation it was easily Deerhunter's slickest record yet. Overall, a more commercially appealing release, but lacking in the weird creative edge that makes the band's best albums their best albums. So in this progression, where does that put Why Hasn't Everything Already Disappeared? Is it a bounce back? Is it a return to form? Is it a refreshing new direction? Honestly, it's none of the above. This thing is hands down the band's blandest record. It is chock full of these middling instrumentals that occasionally get a little trippy, a little art rocky, vaguely baroque in their pretty and luscious arrangements. But despite how layered this album occasionally gets, the pacing of these songs can be very tedious. And the presentation of this instrumentation, frankly, is just kind of boring. Very basic, very dry, not nearly as adventurous sonically and texturally as Deerhunter has been known to be. I mean, don't get me wrong, the band does take a few risks on this LP. There are a few unexpected cuts like Greenpoint Gothic, an instrumental cut with mostly lifeless rhythms and Halloween synths, and these very plucky intervals that sound like they're coming off of a xylophone, but most likely are not. The whole thing sounds like a quartet of cartoon skeletons starting a progressive synth band and like banging out notes on their rib cages. Even more unusual is the incredibly abstract Détournement, whose inclusion onto the record and its message seems to be rooted in some meta-commentary about art and the world and travel. The entire track revolves around this somewhat disjointed instrumental and some heavily manipulated spoken word. It mostly just sounds like I'm listening to elevator music at a postmodern art installation. The song Tarnung is another track that's mostly instrumental. It features the same plucky instrumentation that was on Greenpoint Gothic, but now it's being delivered in this very steady arpeggio state. It's set against some very thick and drony horns as well as these cultish group vocals. It's another moment on the record where the pacing is kind of tedious though, even if I do think the stylistic change of pace is kind of refreshing for Deerhunter. I do like that Deerhunter is trying to change it up a little bit, but these unusual detours for the band are not really great enough to be highlights on the record, nor do they creatively reinforce the core tracks of the album, all of which are pretty unadventurous for Deerhunter, which wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world if the songs and the performances were super sharp. And Why Hasn't Everything Disappeared does deliver some well-written and well-produced songs. A personal highlight for me on that front is the song Plains. The tight, funky groove on this track is delivered with a playful demeanor, the layered instrumentation is gorgeous, the soaring synths or strings are heavenly. However, Plains does not reflect the numerous low points throughout this album that are pretty uneventful, like the frustratingly awkward and indulgent closing track on this record. It has this kind of rickety ragtag vibe to it, but none of the entertainment value that usually comes with sounding this raw. The progressions and the pacing and the instrumental interlude that the track just kind of coasts out on are all pretty drab. Bradford Cox is really overselling the song vocally as he's kind of contorting his voice throughout the points of the song where you can actually hear him, where his mic isn't literally dropping out. Obviously an intentional choice, but it's not something that adds to the entertainment quality of the song, in my view. And believe it or not, this is one of the rare moments on this record where Bradford actually sounds like he has kind of a pulse. I'd say on the first two cuts of this thing, he sounds so comatose it actually takes away from the quality of the songwriting. And the tunes on this thing don't really pick up until we get to the song Element, whose very easygoing rock grooves are great. I love the regal chords and the weepy layers of instrumentation, as well as the background vocals that are very deep and in sync and very tight. Elemental. Definitely one of the more fun and cheeky moments on this record. I think Futurism is another spot on this record where the band's pop prowess shows, but the recording is so just one-dimensional and gray and flat and so lo-fi that I think it, again, impedes on the enjoyability of the track. I personally just don't see what Deerhunter gets out of such a flat, gray, lifeless sound. As I used to truly love Deerhunter's releases for their color and their texture and their kaleidoscopic aura. And now with this record, it just sounds muddy and occasionally vaguely dreamy. And not that you can't do this sound justice. I think there have been bands that have been working with similar aesthetics to this record and have gotten better results but somehow less recognition. One group that certainly comes to mind is Paper Cuts. But I don't know, man, this record to me, it's a total crapshoot. The vibe, the style, the recording quality, the song quality, there's really very little in the way of consistency on this LP. It's truly all over the place. I mean, at least on some of the band's more recent releases that have underwhelmed me, it seemed like they went into the record with a cohesive idea or direction. Meanwhile, this feels really messy, really half-baked, really underwhelming. A few tracks and songs that I thought were pretty decent but could have been greatly improved with better production, or at least weren't held back by whatever production they were filtered through on this thing. A few weird abstract and instrumental additions that mostly felt like filler. Yeah, I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Deerhunter, forever.